247Sports just released their way too early 2022 Big Ten win totals, according to Bud Elliott, who designed the win totals and collaborated with Brad Crawford to write an article, which I am linking down below. I encourage you to read that article. The article is titled Big Ten Football, Projecting Preseason Win Totals for Every Team. It provides Brad's insight along with Bud's win total projection. Brad basically summarizes his thoughts on the team, each team, and why he thinks they will go over, under, or meet Bud's win total projection. He summarizes all of those thoughts in about a paragraph for each of the 14 Big Ten teams. It's a good read. I like having another opinion aside my own, and I agree with a lot of his opinions. So go down, click the link, and read the article. I very much encourage you to do so. And we're talking about these win totals because I think it's interesting. And I think that more importantly than just the win totals being interesting, it provides some insight into the unseen and unheard of predictions, thoughts, and overall opinions on each of the programs simply by a number listed beside their logo. If you're new to this channel, or you've been watching it for a while but have not subscribed, I encourage you to hit that big red subscribe button, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below on some of the teams we're discussing today, or one, or all of them, whatever you want, and I will try to reply to you as I feel it like it is important for YouTube creators to reply and engage in discussion with their commenters. And it's part of what I love about the college football community is just the engagement and the discussion surrounding it. And more importantly, hit the like button if you like this video. Without further ado, let's get down and dirty and into work and discuss the Big Ten win totals presented by 247Sports, according to Bud Elliott. So a few things immediately jump out to me. Okay, 1, Wisconsin and Illinois are being given benefit of the doubt. You could say Michigan and Minnesota are as well, but Minnesota, they're like Wisconsin with slightly better QB play, and unlike Wisconsin, they don't have to play Ohio State, yet they're given the same win total. Michigan, they do play Ohio State. Duh. They're huge rivals. In my opinion, it's the best rivalry in all of sports. Play in the same division. But outside of Ohio State, you look at Michigan's schedule and you go, what? They're given their other two toughest opponents, in my opinion, Michigan State and Nebraska, are home games, likely to be night games that are hyped up with extra crowd noise. And at Iowa, Iowa doesn't really have a great offense. Their schedule is honestly a cakewalk unless Michigan is to not be a good team like we think they are going to be. But Wisconsin and Illinois, not only do they have a lot of aspects that are worse than Minnesota and Michigan and other teams who could be given benefit of the doubt, but they have tough schedules. They have tough schedules. Their offenses are, no offense, but they're one-dimensional. The quarterback play at both of these programs is too subpar, in my opinion, for them to meet the win totals provided. Illinois, I think Brett Bielema was moving this program in the right direction, and I think you saw that this past season. They lose, I think, the most production out of any team in the Big Ten, though, because so much of their team were super seniors, and they're all gone. They returned Chase Brown, but in my opinion, that's about the only positive aspect besides their culture and the direction the program is heading in. Wisconsin seems to be heading the opposite direction with their 1940s World War I trench warfare offense that pays them dividends and allows them to blow everyone out except Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, and a team who is what Wisconsin used to be in Minnesota. Minnesota is, quite frankly, what Wisconsin used to be. They have solid offensive line play. Their defense is next to invincible. Wisconsin's was also last year, but while Wisconsin has gutter trash QB play, Minnesota just has below average to average QB play. And that's how Wisconsin would beat you, is they'd have that below average to average QB play, but they'd be great at everything else. And Above average to below average can limit you and does limit you in certain things, but if you have a great supporting cast and a great defense, it's not going to stop you from getting 11, 10, even 12 or 13 wins like Wisconsin did in 2017 with Alex Hornibrook. That's what Minnesota is now. Wisconsin is not that anymore. Graham Mertz, very poor quarterback, and Wisconsin loses so much. They lose some guys on the defensive line. I think on the offensive line, they lose their starting tight end. They lose their fullback. They lose some good linebackers, lose some wide receivers, including Danny Davis III. And their schedule is tough. And we'll get into that later when I discuss my predictions. But I think that both of these teams are being given some benefit of the doubt for sure. Another point, you look at these teams. Ohio State, they won 11 games last year, went 11-2. Michigan went 12-2. Michigan State also went 11-2. Iowa went 10-4. But outside of that name, and Purdue went 9-4. Michigan State, by wins from last year, you subtract the win total from this year, which I know is regular season, but just do it. They have the biggest drop off. They're expected to take a massive step back, is what I see when I see that little 7 drawn out beside their logo. And while I agree that I think they're going to take a step back, and I think that they're not going to play as well against good teams all around, they're not going to be as per se clutch. They're just not going to be as good as they were last year. And a lot of that's because Walker is leaving, and Walker did things that Michigan State couldn't even scheme out. Walker just outplayed by himself opposing defenses. He was that good of a player, and I think losing him, losing some offensive linemen, losing some other critical players as well, especially Jacob Panashuk in the other defensive end, could hurt, and I think it will hurt. But 7 wins, in my opinion, is too much. Because as Brad Crawford himself said, you just have to circle all of Michigan State's tough games that they are likely not going to win. And you circle Ohio State, Michigan, at Penn State. He also circled Wisconsin, but we're just going to throw that out in the trash. Because you know me, I'm not counting Wisconsin playing at Michigan State as a game they will likely not win. They will likely win that game. You have 3 games that they likely won't win, or that they're the least likely to win in my opinion, and that's Ohio State 1, Michigan 2, Penn State 3. That's still 9 wins. And then let's say, they're going to lose to a team who they should beat, but it happens to everyone. They're still going 8-4. And that's what I have them going, actually, is 8-4, 9-3 is also very possible. I think it's more possible than 7-5. They're a tough team. They're well coached. They may not have the best schemers in the world, and I'm just saying that because it's my opinion. But Tucker gives his players mental juice. They will run through a wall for him, and they do have talent thanks to the transfer portal and some coaches who know how to develop. So I think that a 7-win total, over. You should be hearing the over alarm going off if you bet, in my opinion. And Brad Crawford would agree. Nor do I advise betting, but I'm just saying for 7-win total for a team like Michigan State, I just like to voice that strong opinion. Ohio State and Michigan are seen as the Big Ten's best teams. This is another pretty obvious point to me. They're the only teams who are given win totals that are double digits. Michigan's, they have a pretty easy schedule. Ohio State, they're Ohio State, and they return tons of talent. They upgraded a defensive coaching staff. Their talent is so far and above everyone else's, it's insane. And they're given 11 because you're not going to give 12, because no one ever gives a 12-win total. That's never happened, I don't think. And Michigan, they lose a lot on defense, so that's why they're not given 11, even with their easy schedule, because they are expected to take a step back on defense, and they return a lot of their offense, but their defense was a big part of their season last year. And when their defense didn't play well, didn't play well in Georgia or Michigan State. I'd say when their defense didn't play well, they were 0-2 when their defense didn't play well, being honest. So you look at that and you see what Michigan loses on defense, even with an easy schedule. 10-2 is pretty realistic, but these two teams are obviously assumed to be the best in the Big Ten. And I think that the game that takes place on it's the last game for both teams. I forget the date. I think it's November 26th of this season. Again, pardon me if I'm wrong, Ohio State and Michigan fans. But that game is going to be the game, ironically, that determines who wins the Big Ten, most likely, in everyone's minds, and including my mind. Both of these teams could realistically meet 11-0 versus 11-0. And if even more chaos happens, it could be number 1 versus number 2. Another game of the century in Columbus. And finally, my final point of interest is Nebraska, Purdue, Maryland, and Rutgers are fairly low. And what I mean by this is all of these teams I have winning 2 or more games than their indicated win total on my own personal record predictions. I have Rutgers going 5-7, Maryland 7-5, Purdue 8-4, and I have Nebraska going 10-2 and winning the West. So, and those are because of multiple different reasons. I'll explain it in a few seconds per team. Nebraska's just because their incoming transfers, upgrades all around at coaching staff, mainly actually exclusively offensively, but their defensive coaching staff is already good. Mark Whipple and Mickey Joseph were huge hires. They bring in Casey Thompson at QB, who is arguably a upgrade over Adrian Martinez. They upgrade their wide receiver room depth with some incoming transfers. They're all around just upgrading from the transfer portal, and they're being slept on. This year, people are finally saying Scott Frost is about to be nailed in the coffin. And last year, they also came very close to being bowl eligible or potentially winning 8 games. They never got blown out or dominated in any of their losses. Purdue, they return Aiden O'Connell, and outside of their 2 best players in David Bell and George Karlaftis, and one of their better players in, I think, Jackson Anthrop, they return practically everyone else, which is huge, again, especially when you have a starting quarterback returning. Good chemistry. Jeff Brom is proven to develop wide receivers and command offenses as it is. He's very forward-thinking when it comes to the sport. And their defense was solid and returns a lot, so expect it to possibly get better. That's why I have them going 8-4. Plus, their schedule is not very challenging. They host Penn State. They host Nebraska. They host Iowa. They host Northwestern. That's their conference teams they host. They play at Minnesota, at Maryland, at Wisconsin, at Illinois, and at Indiana. Notice, there is no Michigan, Ohio State, or Michigan State on their schedule, who are going to be the 3 best teams in the East, and all of those teams could vie for, in my opinion, the top 4 teams. That's whatever. I was trying to say something else, but anyway, they could all vie for being the top 3 teams of the entire Big Ten, depending on what happens. Very easy and workable schedule. Maryland, what they return on offense, Talia Tagovailoa, the entire offensive line, Dante Demas, Rakeem Jarrett. Crazy. Now they lose Chigoziem Okonkwo, their tight end, who is going to be drafted in the NFL this year. But they return so much on offense. Dan Enos has not been a proven offensive coordinator, but he has been proven at developing quarterbacks. He helped develop Tua Tagovailoa, and I think that if he can help Talia take an even bigger step forward than from 2020 to 2021, with Rakeem Jarrett, with Dante Demas, with the offensive line all returning, which will signify at minimum some small improvement, Maryland's offense will be frustrating to work with just about every Big Ten team. And again, look at their schedule. They start off with facing Buffalo, at Charlotte, facing SMU. That's right there, a 3-0 start. And then at Michigan will probably be a loss. It's at the second best team in the Big Ten, in my opinion. But then you host Michigan State, host Purdue, you play at Indiana, and you host Northwestern. Maryland, if everything goes right, could totally go. This sounds crazy, but it's true. Could go 4-0 in that stretch. And I'm thinking 2-2 or 3-1. And that right there allows you to meet that win total. And you also host Rutgers later in the year, which will likely be a win, or you already push over it. So that's why I think they'll go over. And finally, Rutgers, 3 wins. I don't think they're going to go bowling this year, but at Boston College, hosting Wagner, playing at Temple, and even hosting Iowa with how bad Iowa's offense is, if Rutgers can build some early momentum, get some crowds to come to their stadium, I think they could upset Iowa. Boom, 4-0 start, you already got your 4 wins. And even if they lose at Boston College or Iowa or both, you host Indiana and you play at Maryland. You even host Penn State. I mean, there are multiple, even Nebraska, if Nebraska's not as good as I think they are, there are multiple opportunities for Rutgers to get 4 or 5 wins. And if Greg Schiano is a solid coach, they certainly will. And they're going to be solid on defense, especially solid on special teams. That are my points of interest. And finally, before we close out this video, I am going to list my record prediction for each of these teams. But before that, I want you to comment down below what you see from this win total, what you think the win total is trying to say. Like where I take it as they think Michigan State is expected to take a big step back, or Wisconsin and Illinois are being given benefit of the doubt. Maybe you think this shows that some other teams are being given a benefit of the doubt, or that they're thinking some team is going to be better than they were last year. Tell me what you think, what you see down below. Let's get into my record prediction. Okay, so starting from the top left with Minnesota, then I'm going to go down that column and down the next column. Minnesota, I have going 9-3 with losses to at Michigan State, at Nebraska, and at Wisconsin. I think their floor is 7-5 or 8-4, and I think their ceiling is 11-1. They don't have Ohio State or Michigan on their schedule, and they return a lot. They're solid on defense, and Tanner Morgan is just good enough at quarterback, and he's been good enough before to where he won't throw their season away. Wisconsin. I have Wisconsin going 7-5 with losses to at Ohio State, at Michigan State, hosting Purdue, at Iowa, and at Nebraska. Their quarterback play is atrocious. Their defense will reload even though they lose a lot, and their run game will be solid. But at the end of the day, their offense will be so predictable because of their bad QB play that teams like Ohio State, who is more talented than them, will just overrun them. Nebraska and Michigan State, who have solid front sevens, will slow down their run game enough to force them to pass. Iowa do the same thing, and Purdue's going to be hard because of how good they will be offensively. Next up, we have Iowa. Iowa, I have going 8-4. I have them losing in an upset at Rutgers, hosting Michigan, losing to Ohio State, and playing at Minnesota. I think that Iowa, they have a similar bad QB play to Wisconsin, but they are more solid on special teams. They return one of the best, if not the best secondary in the nation. They do have that tough game at Ohio State, but I do have more faith for whatever reason in Kirk Ferentz. And I also think they're solid. I think they have a better culture too. It's just kind of a hunch that I have that I think they'll be better than Wisconsin. Nebraska. Nebraska is the big one on the list. I have them going 10-2 and winning the West, only losing to Michigan and Iowa. I think that they will have an explosive offense like they did last year, but with far more consistency. They brought in Kevin Williams and Hunter Anthony on the O-line. Their new O-line coach, Donovan Raiola, is encouraged with the improvements along with head coach Scott Frost. Mark Whipple and Mickey Joseph are developing that pass game, and they brought in some transfers at special teams to help fix their kicking and punting issues. All of these things, at least if you include a slightly improved culture and winning mindset, could lead for a big year for Nebraska, and I think it will. Illinois, I have going 4-8. Their only wins coming against Wyoming, Virginia, Chattanooga, and an away game against an even worse Northwestern team. I think that Illinois loses too much to go bowling, but look out for 2023, because they are beginning to put around a tighter fence, a tighter, more secure fence around their own home in-state talent, and that will pay off dividends in the future. Chase Brown also returns, and he could be a highlight reel running back if the offensive line does well. Purdue, I have going 8-4. Aiden O'Connell returning. I look at their schedule. Could they go 6-6? Yes, I think that their floor would be just missing bowl eligibility. Their ceiling, though, I think would be 9-3, which would be an improvement in the regular season compared to last year. Their schedule goes their way. They're going to have a good offense. Their defense is going to be average to above average, which combined with their offense and Aiden O'Connell will be good enough to cause some teams some damage. Northwestern, I have going 3-9 and the only team in the Big Ten to go winless in conference play. I think that they will beat Duke, Southern Illinois, and Miami. And I love Pat Fitzgerald. I really do. I think that he is an underrated coach. But here is the thing. Bad QB play. You can't recruit because of academic standards, and probably because, if we're being honest, Pat Fitzgerald isn't the most modern head coach, and a lot of that is due to restrictions. Northwestern has tons of restrictions, and the schedule's hard. So inferior talent, the NIL and transfer portal, you see this with Brandon Joseph going to Notre Dame, kids aren't going to want to play at Northwestern. I would say that they probably wouldn't have even back then, but now, as there are schools can now but schools can now get their players to get business deals that get them paid with other businesses. Northwestern doesn't have the same opportunities that other schools do, nor do they have the same reputation when it comes to the football field. It's going to hurt them. I think it's already hurting them now, and it's sad. I hope Pat Fitzgerald proves me wrong, but they have to do better on offense and defense in order for that to happen. Now we're on to the next column, which is the East. It is Ohio State. The Ohio State Buckeyes I have going 12-0. Their most likely loss, I think, will be at home to the Michigan Wolverines, but I think that they will win that game. They have such an elite offense, such a deep wide receiver core, deep O-line, deep running back, deep defensive line, deep cornerback. Linebacker is probably the shallowest room, and even that has talent and some heft to it. So Ohio State's the team to beat. And Michigan could be the team to beat, and we'll get into that in a few seconds. But Ohio State, C.J. Stroud, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Trevion Henderson, watch out for that trio. Watch out. Like J.K. Dobbins, like Chase Young, like Justin Fields, you could once again have 3 Ohio State Buckeyes who are in the Heisman finalist conversation. Once again, you very realistically, tripping over my own words, could have that with this team. Michigan, they're the second best team in the Big Ten, and their schedule's very favorable. They return a lot on offense, return a lot on defense. When it comes to the second stringers, is what I meant to say. They do lose a lot on defense, and I shouldn't have said they return a lot, but overall, when you look at the 2 deep, they actually do return a lot of guys who did get reps on defense. But they lose Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo, which will be hard to replace, and for that I have them going 11-1 with a loss to Ohio State. Up next, we have Penn State. Penn State's given a win total of 8. I think that they will only get to 7-5 with losses at Purdue, at Auburn, at Michigan, and hosting Minnesota and hosting Ohio State. They lose so much on defense. They lose Jaquan Brisker, much of their secondary. They lose DC Brent Pry, and Sean Clifford and their offense, especially their run game and O-line, I do not necessarily have faith in. Michigan State. I already discussed this. I have Michigan State going 8-4. I think that they will lose an upset at Maryland, hosting Ohio State, playing at Michigan, and at Penn State. I think they will beat both Minnesota and Wisconsin at home. Peyton Thorne and Jaden Reed in the wide receiver core will be dangerous, along with the front seven, specifically the defensive tackle room, which I think is the best in the Big Ten, and the linebacker room, which could be the best in the Big Ten. I don't know if it is. But offensive line and secondary is areas of deep concern, and we do not know how the running back room will look, because it will be very hard for Jarek Broussard or Jalen Berger to fill in the footsteps that Kenneth Walker left behind. Up next is Maryland. Maryland, I do have them going 7-5. I think that the Terrapins lose to Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Ohio State. Already discussed them a lot, but in summary, just think that their offense is going to be very hard to manage with the return of Talia Tagovailoa, Raheem Jarrett, their entire offensive line, and Dante Demas. Indiana is next. I have them going 4-8 and actually perfectly matching that win total. I think that they will beat Illinois, Idaho, Western Kentucky, and they will have a huge upset against Purdue in the final week, their final game, which is a rivalry game, in fact, which is why I have it as an upset. Indiana, they did well in the transfer portal, but they have such a talent deficiency. They replaced their offensive coordinator. It certainly looks like Tom Allen's 2020 miracle was actually a 2020 fluke. And finally, Rutgers. Rutgers, I think, goes 5-7 with wins at Boston College, hosting Wagner, playing at Temple, hosting Iowa, and hosting Indiana. Rutgers is going to be tough on defense, tough on special teams with Valentino Ambrosio, and I think one of their all Big Ten selections, punter, or maybe he wasn't selected, but their punter is good as well. They have a lot of questions on offense. They replaced their defensive coordinator with Minnesota's co-defensive coordinator, former, and safeties coach, which I think was a really good upgrade. And I think that this team does have the potential to have a bright future. That is all, though, for today's episode. It did run a little long, but I still think when analyzing 14 Big Ten teams, it's hard to do it in less than an hour, honestly, because I love talking about it so much. But that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed listening to it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, and comment your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys around. Bye.